We're actually going to do a little bit more of an interview-style presentation. We have our friend Jason Fisher with us. Jason is the, and I always forget your title, Infrastructure Manager at Goodwill Industries of Central Indiana. Jason's going to share with us today just a little bit about his journey as he's played a significant role in taking Goodwill from being really an old-school infrastructure IT company, in-house infrastructure, really doing things kind of the old-fashioned but the tried-and-true way, and really moving the company and transitioning his business unit into really being business-focused and being a massive tool for change in the organization as Goodwill continues to grow and evolve. Jason's got about 16 years of experience in the technology field. Before that, he's actually a vet of the U.S. Marine Corps. He's going to share with Pat Spencer. Pat is our Midwest executive here at Bluelock, or I guess not here, we're at a conference center, but we are based in Indiana, so I think of it as here. But Pat is our Midwest executive. Pat has about 3 decades of experience, and he prefers, I say, more than 2 decades instead of almost 3. That's right. Pat has some experience, especially in the technology and financial industries, and really has focused his career on helping companies grow and change and adapt to that change. Before I let them get started, I do want to remind you guys, this is an interactive session today. We're not lecturing you. We're not going to turn the lights down so that you can fall asleep and then you'll wake up in 45 minutes when your neighbor accidentally bumps you. But we want to keep this interactive. So I'm going to kind of hover around. I'll probably stay back there in the back. If you have questions, throw a hand up. I'll stop these guys because they'll chat on forever if I don't. And we'll ask the questions. We'll get that out, and then we'll probably have a little bit more time at the end for questions. Okay? So no further ado, Pat Spencer and Jason Fisher, everyone.
Appreciate that. Can everyone hear me okay up here? All right, good deal. We have a good crowd this morning, Jason, so hopefully you've got some good things to tell them, right?
I hope so.
All right, good deal. Well, we're going to dig in here and really wanted to talk a little bit about Jason and more or less his journey, because this is about his journey through an evolution that Goodwill went through. Probably not much unlike a lot of your companies today. So, but with that, Jason, tell us a little bit about your background and more or less how you arrived at Goodwill, and what were some of your thoughts and some of your considerations as you went from what I believe was a contractor to an employee.
Sure. I came into Goodwill as a contractor just to work on a single project. Kind of landed at a great time, kind of the right place at the right time. Came in to work on an Active Directory redesign project, and as soon as I got there, immediately noticed that they had just migrated off of Exchange and moved towards Gmail. And this was kind of a unique glimpse for me. I'm an Exchange guy previously as well, with Active Directory and VMware and SANS and such. So we're working on this Active Directory project, and their system engineer leaves the company to pursue better opportunities, and they also have a horribly, just a critically unstable VMware environment. The SAN was unstable, the VMware hosts were unstable, a lot of late nights, a lot of infrastructure failures that we had to deal with. So it worked out really well while I was on that contract, and just happened to have the background to kind of help them out while their system engineer was a position was open. And after the Active Directory project was over, and we've kind of stabilized the VMware environment. We had a lot of resource constraints, still a lot of instability, but for the most part it was kind of limping along. It was a unique opportunity for Goodwill to kind of try before they buy. They still hadn't found somebody to replace their previous system engineer, and the opportunity presented itself for my contract to be over and for me to stay on full time. So kind of worked out really well, bypassed the whole interview process, got to stay on at Goodwill, and really just continue working with that VMware environment for the time being. It took a little while for us to get to a point where we're ready to talk about now it's stable, now what is going to be the next steps.
Thank you, because I know your background is probably shared with a lot of you in terms of things that you've done, projects you've been involved with, et cetera. One thing I'd like to do next is talk a little bit about Goodwill and really for two reasons. One, because that's where Jason works, and that's the company we're going to be kind of going through today. But also, as I became more familiar with Goodwill, and having actually lived here in Indianapolis all my life, there were so many things I didn't realize that they're involved in the community in terms of trying to make our community a better place. And I found it to be a very diverse company, from retail to commercial services to education. And maybe talk a little bit more about what all Goodwill does. And yes, this is a plug for Goodwill, and invite you to check out their site. It's a lot more than just the retail stores and the commercials. But
Sure.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
this was quite a surprise to me as well when I came on board. Of course, I've always known about donating and going to the Goodwill stores, buy some cost-effective products. What I didn't know was that that was really just the front engine that drives an educational program. They've got 9 educational adult high schools throughout the central Indiana area. This is where adults can go back, and instead of getting a GED, they can get an actual high school diploma. This is subsidized by the retail environment and government grants. So you can go back if you've got a GED or you dropped out of high school. This is an opportunity to go back, and we've got a lot of success stories through this. And I was completely unaware that this program even existed. They also have a light manufacturing division that we call commercial services, and this is where they employ a lot of people that have barriers, whether that's a mental or physical disability, or maybe you've got a prior conviction, which makes it difficult for you to find a job. So we'll get you into some manufacturing. There's also janitorial services and stuff that this offers, buildings and grounds. There's a lot of different things that their tentacles kind of reach into around the city and provide a lot of jobs. There's also a nurse-family partnership that works with first-time mothers, particularly in impoverished areas, works with the mothers and the newborn child from the point of the pregnancy and 2 years beyond, just to kind of try to set that scale. And one of the goals that we're looking for is to break the generational poverty.
As you say, that's one of the things that stood out to me is on the adult education is how they actually, not only do they have the education, but they have daycares and they give students bus passes. So they really are trying to take out what those obstacles are, or those barriers are to getting an education. And so it's just an amazing organization. And so again, keep doing what you guys are doing for sure. All right, let's talk about the journey. All right, so Jeff Tunn is a CIO at Goodwill, and I believe there is a New Year's celebration that took place, only it was the wrong year, but it took place back in 2011. But maybe tell us how this journey actually started from taking a look at where you were to where you wanted to go.
Sure. When Jeff Tunn and when people walk into our conference room, they always see Happy New Year 2016, and they want to know, what that's all about. It was kind of it was a celebration. It was a neat way for Jeff to present his vision to the rest of the department, which was very different. Cloud, this is 2011, so cloud it's a huge buzzword, but a lot of people don't really know what it is, what it means, what it can do for you. So cloud really initially was more of a SaaS type of an initiative, and that's where the exchange to Gmail occurred. We also have a number of other systems that we took from being an in-house server, locally managed, to something that we put out in the cloud, like Workday is an example for HR systems. Facility Dude is one that we use for our facilities and maintenance ticket tracking. And each time we do this, that's one less system that we have to manage internally. It's one less server that we have to maintain and plan for and maintain. So moving these out has been a huge benefit to us, and that really started the journey of what Jeff Tunn saw as our department kind of shifting, and instead of being the typical IT shop where 90% of our time is taken up with doing the maintenance, doing tickets, doing just kind of your typical day-to-day, to shifting us and giving us the ability to be more business focused and to solve problems for the business and work on what we like to call the A to C projects as opposed to the C to F projects. So that's been the journey has taken us from basically chaos mode in a lot of our environments. The virtual environment was definitely in a chaos mode when I first came on board, but there was a number of other environments as well that when your virtual environment is unstable, it just kind of reaches into all kinds of different things because your servers aren't performing as they should. We've got SQL problems because we can't get queries fast enough, IOPS problems, you name it. So the beginning of that journey was for Jeff to kind of lay out this transformation for us to shift from being your typical system engineer, system admins, and being more of business engineers and business admins.
This next slide, we speak to a little bit in terms of Goodwill's transition or transformation, if you will, and whether you're looking at Gartner, CIO.com, a lot of the studies and surveys that are out there, most people are agreeing that there is this shift that's taking place. And if you go back 15 years and you talk about software as a service, you begin to understand, how many clients did Salesforce.com have 15 years ago, and how receptive were institutions to bringing in software as a service to replace HR systems or financial systems. And in the beginning, there were objections and there were some barriers and there were some hurdles. But I think now, if you have a smartphone and you're downloading apps and your business is using Workday or Gmail or Office 360, we've kind of come full circle. And for a lot of years, a lot of the experts say that the business units had control over the software as a service piece, and now IT has the opportunity to really manage the Office 365s or the Gmails and the Workdays, things that will make that type of difference. And so the transformation that Jason was speaking of, Jeff more or less lays out in terms of information technology being more operations focused, and then the business technology is serving your client needs. And Jason, in your case, your clients would be your business units. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so we talk a little bit about this from moving from software as a service to recovery as a service to infrastructure as a service. But maybe tell us a little about that journey for Goodwill and Sure. what you guys went through.
The SaaS part, or at least as far as the Gmail is concerned, was right before my time, and it was kind of an interesting. I still say it's just an interesting thing for me to see, being that engineer. I need to get my hands on the server and manage the Exchange server, the clustered servers, whatever we've got. So it was kind of neat for me to see what happens when you don't have to do that, when you don't have to plan for the next update or the next patch release or even the next full version release, or we're having problems or capacity issues with your Exchange server. So many issues, and everybody out there that has managed a mail server of any flavor knows exactly what kind of headaches I'm talking about. So this was a really neat glimpse, and when Jeff really laid out that vision to potentially move out towards recovery as a service and infrastructure as a service, I was kind of on board with that. Mm-hmm. And what we did was step through it. We bought some time, you could say, with the SaaS, because now we don't have to manage the Exchange environment or our HR systems and a couple of other systems. So we bought ourselves a lot of time to be able to shift the focus on what is the right environment for us to have for recovery as a service. We kind of did this as a stair step. We did our disaster recovery environment was the worst, even worse than our production environment. So we took that first and also used that as a test to see whether we really wanted to jump in and do our production servers. There's definitely some nervousness about our SQL servers being in the cloud. What kind of latency are we going to have when we pull queries and such? So we set up the RAS with Bluelock out in Las Vegas. Our biggest challenges of that were our environment at Goodwill was not fast enough. We had IOPS problems and we had bandwidth problems just trying to get all that data out to Las Vegas for the initial seed. Once that was there, I think that's where the part where Jeff Tunn likes to say, I go on vacation. So once RAS was up and running, we performed several different tests, and the first one was really just to lay down what happens if I'm hit by a bus or a tornado comes through and I can't get to the office, I can't do the recovery. My system admin's not there, he can't do it. There's no IT staff available, how are we going to recover? Bluelock has a run book that opens up our recovery as a service and basically does the entire process of recovery without our input whatsoever. So what we did was we set up with our business customers, and so also helped us sell kind of a proof of concept. So we had our business customers come in each of the different functional areas and test their applications in that recovery as a service environment. And me and the other system engineer guys just kind of sat back on the back of the room and watched them work. We weren't supposed to be there. We had somebody else call into Bluelock that's authorized. I think that was the CFO calls into Bluelock and says, we need to declare a disaster, mock disaster. So the entire exercise occurred as if I was incapacitated or at a beach. That's the part Jeff likes to say is I'm drinking margaritas on the beach. Meanwhile, we've got an emergency happening here, and we don't we don't have to worry about it because it literally runs itself as far as we're concerned. From our perspective, Bluelock runs the entire thing. I mentioned that was kind of a test as well. So while this environment is up, some of our customers are commenting on how fast they're able to pull up some of these reports. So what they had done the morning of the cutover or into the DR environment is we had them make changes in SharePoint or in any one of their systems that we haven't replicated. And then when they spin it up, now they come into our conference room and they want to make sure that their changes are there because we're telling them that we have near real-time replication. So the first comments that are coming out is like, wow, this is really fast. I would be the first one to admit that our environment was slow to begin with. We had IOPS problems even in our production environment. But the fact was, from our office in Indy, making queries to the data center in Las Vegas, we were operating faster than our production environment does on a normal day-to-day basis. So the test absolutely passed. And this isn't the fastest of what Bluelock has to offer because we're going into some of the lower cost storage options that they have in Vegas, where here in Indy for our production, we're going to use faster spinning disks. So fast forward a little bit, after all that success, we also migrated the head end of our network, which kind of fits in between that RAS and IaaS arrow. We moved the head end of our network, so all of the firewall equipment, VPN concentrators, everything, we moved that out of our data center and into to another data center where we can just have all the egress points, multiple points of entry into the building, so we don't have to pay that out at our corporate office, which was incredibly expensive to try to bring a separate line in as a dual entry into our building. So redundancy was an issue. But at any rate, once we got through all that, moved towards IaaS, we really just used the same process, which was a Zerto replication that we sent all of our data out to Las Vegas. We just used that as a seed, shifted that replication so that it goes to Indy. Once that was all transferred, we picked a night to do the cutover and literally had our only downtime was the time it took to power on the servers was really all it would have been. And that's really only because our environment required us to keep the same address spaces when we moved from our existing data center into Bluelock. In order to do that, we needed to make some network changes on the head end of our network so the routes pointed the right way and all that good stuff. Our downtime was less than an hour, and we moved about 80 servers. I want to say it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 terabytes worth of data, and our customers had no clue. Other than the notifications that we sent out saying that we were performing maintenance that night, they had no clue that we just moved our data center. We literally picked it up and moved it. I've done a few data center moves in the past, and this is in a whole other category of data center moves. It was truly smooth.
So as you were going through this process, what were some of the thoughts of the team moving the data center?
Sure. Well, one of the fears that I had, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. There were a lot of details that I'm not aware of, deep networking details that just quite honestly exceed my level of expertise and that of my staff. So one of the things that we noticed about working with Bluelock and some of the other cloud providers that we were working with was how easy it was to work with their teams. And I worked with Adam and several other guys on their team. I don't know how else to describe it other than they really integrated into our process, where other entities that we were working with were just very straightforward about, here's your stuff, here's some documents you can read on how to import your VMs over here and how to transfer the data, here's how you manage your VMs and stuff. But these guys were actually right there working with us, and the project management of the whole project, the meetings, just the whole thing was handled from start to finish in a way that was very hands-on, very interpersonal, and critical for our staff because we have a relatively small staff and a very small budget. So hiring some of these people to provide that expertise, at $200 an hour for a CCIE or whatever, that's going to take a big bite out of Goodwill's budget.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges. So obviously this is a transformation, it's an evolution, it doesn't take place overnight, a lot of planning, so there had to be some bumps in the road. What were some of the challenges that you had, and how did your team take a look at overcoming those?
Sure. Time was the biggest challenge. It's mentioned up there twice because it is that big of a challenge. As you know, when you're managing your environment, your day-to-day stuff, it is very difficult to make the time to coordinate such a data center move. I mean, as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts, and it's really important that we minimize any kind of outages that might occur. We've got 80 plus locations, we've got a lot of network, we've got a lot of moving parts going on, so just carving out that time to be able to plan appropriately was probably our biggest challenge. Budgeting was another challenge. Goodwill had not budgeted for the virtual environment to become over capacity so quickly. They grew so fast. You know, a lot of the problems that they had, the instability in the infrastructure was an issue, and part of that was because we didn't have the budget to, you know, buy the latest and greatest VMware hosts or the latest and greatest SANs. You know, we kind of had what we had to work with. That budget problem. Once we were able to kind of carve out the time, what we basically did was just laid it out in two formats, kind of a spreadsheet format, and said, here's what it's going to cost if we build our own data center. You want to do this right. We've had a failure in the past year that caused our data center to lose power. We do not have generators. Our UPSs last for about a half an hour, just long enough for you to shut everything down gracefully is about it. Our DR facility actually lost power on that same day. So, you know, this was very visible to most of our business, and we lost a lot of money as a result of our retail stores not being able to operate. So I took these numbers and said, this is what it's going to cost us to buy new hosts. We need new hosts, and we also need to plan for the future. We've grown exponentially in the last few years, and we know that we are planning to grow that much or more in the next few years. So in order to buy the hosts that we need, these are the kind of specs that we need. This is the kind of SAN we need. This is the kind of generator that we need because we don't have redundant power. If you don't want this to happen again, this is what we've got to do. We take all this to the CIO and to the CFO and start laying all this out. Meanwhile, on the other sheet, we've got what it costs for Bluelock to maintain that same environment. It's very easy to go through and do that in advance, kind of set up your own quote, because you know exactly what your resources are. You know how much storage you need and how much resources from a memory and CPU perspective. So you calculate that all out, you hand that to the CFO and say, look, with a 10-year ROI, they basically work out to be the same. And what I haven't calculated over here is all those soft costs. The soft costs that it costs my team. I mean, you're already paying my salary, but it costs my team time and resources to set up an upgrade, to maintain this environment, to put together these hosts. And what also helps is that the entire executive staff is well aware of the direction that we had come from with all the instability. So they're pretty excited about some form of an upgrade, whether that was building our own data center or utilizing a cloud-hosted option.
So kind of transitioning to, we talked earlier about the team having time and the time that it took to do DR. So talk about, once that transformation was made, what were some of the initiatives that you were able to focus on that gave back a little bit more to the business?
Sure. A couple of initiatives really came to mind when we were talking about this. And the one that equates to time the most for me is just the availability to this SIP Culture project that's up there. So Goodwill has a home pickup program at all of their, I think we've got 55, 60 stores, and we don't really market it, nobody knows. And what ends up happening is people will call the store and ask to have a pickup made. Well, at the store, they just have a typical analog line. They have no way to transfer that call back to our corporate office or to our call center to schedule that pickup. So they tell the customer, you know, I'm sorry, I can't transfer you. I just need you to call this 1-800 number. And the feedback that we were getting from the store managers was that they were getting, you know, 5, 10 calls a day, but our call center was only getting, you know, maybe what amounts to be, you know, 1 or less from each store. So we were clearly not capturing all those calls. The retail division never really looked at this like this was an IT problem to solve. You know, they were looking at it like we need to advertise that number better so people will stop calling the store, so on and so forth. Just by us having the ability to sit in the room and talk about the initiatives with us, because we had started saving that time and we had shifted our focus to work with the business, we had the idea, you know, why don't we just integrate those phones that are out at each location? We've got the rest of the network infrastructure in place to extend VoIP out to these locations. Why don't we just peel them off the analog lines and start sending the calls through a answering service? Seems like a no-brainer. It worked absolutely great. We're only about halfway through all the stores, and as it says there, I think we had something to the tune of like 1,500 or 2,000 calls in June of last year, and this year we have about 4,500 calls, and we're only halfway through installing all these stores. The store managers are chomping at the bit to have us implement this at their locations, but you know, like anything else, we still have a limited amount of time, and our retail stores are open pretty late, so it's hard to get resources out there in the middle of the night to set up the SIP hardware that's required. But we're chomping through it, and this has absolutely just been a huge bonus, unplanned. It wasn't part of any budgets or anything, and they carved out the money to make sure that this moves forward because it's such a big deal. And I really think the neat part about it was we would have never even known about it. We would have not known the business had a problem unless we had the ability to just sit there and talk with them and be engaged with them on a day-to-day. The other one, you know, less involved with the direct impact to my customers, was the impact that we had inside our department, and that was an ability really to start kind of at my level, since it was mostly my job that was being, you know, kind of removed. I no longer needed to manage the VMware environment or the SANs or the network fabric that was behind it. So that's when I shifted into being the infrastructure manager and architect, and shifted a lot of the other responsibilities of Active Directory management and documentation and things down to the system admins, and then their responsibilities. We just keep shifting things down. So in a typical tiered environment where you have your tier 1 help desk, your tier 2, tier 3, so on, we just kept shifting things, documenting processes and shifting them down. That documentation process, I've never been anywhere that really allows you the kind of time that you want to document things that you want. You know, this is the step-by-step procedure. Now I can hand this to somebody at the tier 1 help desk and allow them to solve that problem rather than escalating the call to one of my tier 2 techs, and they have to ask all the same questions over again. So I mean, just the efficiency gains were tremendous. And what we also found, is this statistic up there? Yeah. What we also found was that tier 1 closure rate, they just read from a form. They're quite literally not supposed to think about the problem and try to solve the problem. They're supposed to search and find what we've already documented for them to solve the problem with. They went from about 50% closure rate last year to, they're at 80% this year so far. Obviously, we've got the rest of the year to continue calculating, and we've got a lot more to still to continue documenting. You know, this is a long-term process. So that was a huge advantage. The whole staff, once we started trickling things down a little bit, everybody's eyes started really, you know, kind of lighting up to, wow, this is really, you know, making an impact. And even down at the tier 2 level, where these guys would have normally been cleaning viruses or, you know, just doing your typical mundane day-to-day IT stuff, now these guys are helping us with deployments for new stores, new schools, we've got a new nurse-family partnership initiative starting up. So they're really helping us now with some of these business initiatives, rather than just being the tinkerers kind of behind the curtain that makes our computers run right. So trickling that downhill that's been the biggest gainer of time for us. It also allowed us to become PCI certified. This was something that Goodwill had been trying to do for about 3 years before we finally got it. And mostly it was focus. As anybody that works in retail knows, that PCI is pretty strenuous as far as, you know, what your security requirements are, the interview process. With 50 plus locations, you know, it was kind of a big deal for us to be PCI certified, and this was right around the same time that Target had been hacked as well. So that was definitely on the mind of everybody on the executive staff. So that was kind of a nice feather in our cap to be able to just finally complete that PCI certification process, and, you know, whether our customers know that they're secure when they swipe their card at our stores or not, we know that they're secure, and that goes a long way in our organization. Of course, that's on the retail side. We're also working with the schools on a massive data warehouse program, and they split that out into other charter schools. I don't know if we've actually talked about that. They take this data warehouse idea. It's not just the 9 high schools that we have. It's other high schools, other charter schools across the country, and we can help them maintain their data. And, you know, other sessions, I'm sure you'll talk about big data and how important all that data is, but this is just another example of a project that we probably would not have been able to do. We would not have been able to focus on it, give it the resources that it needed. We certainly didn't have the space in our virtual infrastructure to give them the kind of SQL servers they needed for the data warehouse itself. So again, just another huge benefit to the time that we gained from it. And then last but not least, we developed our own rewards program. So we've got a number of developers on staff that developed a rewards program. You swipe your card or give them your phone number just like you would anywhere else. And we give you discounts based on it, and we now sell that code to other Goodwills and other organizations as a loyalty program.
Excellent. So really some phenomenal projects that you're able to get back from the time that you would have been managing infrastructure and doing some different things. Such a big transformation. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. And for a second, we're going to put a literal elephant in the room here, and that is attrition. I'm a system admin. I hear about all of this cloud coming. I'm fearing for my job. So
absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about what your team went through. How did you get through this? What was the attrition rate? And where are you today with this?
This was, like the elephant in the room. This was very obvious. I'm a VMware guy. It's what I do. Jeff, our CIO, was very well aware of that, and kind of pulled it off to the side before we really got started on the recovery as a service, and pulling off the side. And the conversation we had really went like, what do you need me for? If I no longer have to manage VMware and the SANs, what do you need me for? And so he starts laying out this vision again, and incidentally, I wasn't there in 2011 when he gave that speech, so he was kind of able to lay that 2016 speech down on me. And I was an Exchange guy, so I'd been there for a few months by this time, and I'd already seen that advantage that they had by moving to Gmail. And the same could be said if they had moved to Office 365, just the fact that they didn't have to manage that environment anymore. And I see that because I'm an Exchange certified guy, and I got to get my hands on things, and I see that now that I don't have to do that, how smoothly things run as far as the email system is concerned. So we talked a lot about what my time would be filled with if I'm no longer managing VMware. And it's exactly the types of things that we talked about on the previous slide, where now I'm sitting down. I was a consultant before I got to Goodwill, so now I'm sitting down with our business partners like I'm a consultant again. I'm treating this like it's a service organization, and I'm just listening for your problems. How can we solve these? If we don't know what the business partners are trying to do, what kind of initiatives they have in the next year or two, and they don't know what kind of technologies they might have access to, we got to put those two things together so we can have that, so we can drive that innovation. So that's really what Jeff Tunn had laid out, was that ability for us to help drive innovation by being present, by being in those meetings with the retail executives while they're talking about what problems are really plaguing them and how we can maybe help with expanding our school programs and stuff like that. So that conversation kind of hit home. I also trained years ago on mainframes. So I was able to kind of see this come full circle as well, with just the whole virtual environment, things kind of becoming more centralized again. So I kind of read the tea leaves and said, this is definitely something that's going to be very common in the future, or at least it's not going away anytime soon. So I jumped on board, and wow, am I happy I did.
Now, what about the rest of the team? Was there a lot of attrition, a lot of turnover, or did people adapt? What happened there?
Not at all. Because the process was so smooth, we didn't lose anybody after this process. I believe, we suspect that system engineer that had left after the Exchange project, we believe that had a lot to do with why he left. He was an Exchange guy as well, and he just took away a big part of his job. So it was definitely on the minds of everybody else. They were very quick to see what advantages I was able to have, what my team just on the infrastructure side was able to have, and how that trickles out to the Tier 2 and the Tier 1 teams. So the adoption within TS was actually pretty quick. Once they realized that I wasn't going to be laid off, and it was VMware and the SANs that they took away, if they're not going to lay me off, then they're not going to lay anybody else off either.
Good. Okay, in terms of our story, I think, Dan, you've got a couple things maybe to talk about in terms of wrapping up, and we're certainly going to make time for questions here. But Dan, you want to talk a little bit about next steps in the survey?
As we think about sort of the journey that Jason's been on, obviously Pat and I have conversations all the time, and people say, well, I'm not in the position in the company to make that decision. I'm not, going to stick my neck out there and make this. I think the idea is that we can affect change anywhere within the organization. You don't have to be the CIO of the company to figure out there are things you can do to save time and money for the company and focus on the things that are really going to grow the business. So that's, if you have one takeaway from this, maybe that's something to think about. Anything else, Jason, that you want to throw out before we end today?
Well, really, the only thing we didn't cover was anything in a very technical detail. If anybody's interested in some of the technical challenges, for example, our version of VMware was 4.6 and their version was 5.0 or 5.1 at the time when we migrated. So we had some issues with our VM version and the version of tools, and there was definitely some work involved as we made that transition. And we also got to work with Zerto as part of that transition. I was not aware of Zerto before, and I would promote that in a heartbeat, because that really made this transition very smooth as well. So happy to share any of the technical details that I can with you.
I think we've got a few minutes for some questions. We got about 5 minutes for questions. If anyone has anything for Jason.
How have the skill sets changed on your team?
Interestingly enough, everybody is eager to grow. In the areas where we would have previously been trying to train up our system admins so that they could kind of become system engineers and work with the VMware environment or the SANs, we shift that now towards being the experts or being the managers of a lot of cloud systems. So we still have somebody that manages the Google, we still have somebody that manages CloudLock, which was part of the security that we use within it, and Flash Panel is another management tool. We've got still the Active Directory to manage. So really what has happened for us is everybody's been elevated at least a step or two. So if you were a tier 2 tech and your day-to-day was, like I said before, walking around cleaning up viruses or whatever, now your day-to-day is more project deployment oriented, or problems that you really have to think about. We're giving them that opportunity to really think analytically and become an engineer rather than just being that tech that reads from a script. So that's probably been the biggest impact from an increase, was kind of our tier 2 level techs have definitely elevated to a different level. Yes, ma'am?
My biggest fear of doing stuff in the cloud is the fact that we have horrible internet providers in my company, for my company.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys have any problem with that, or how did you manage that?
Are you in a bad geographical area?
We're in Copenhagen.
The question was, or the statement is that your internet, your connectivity is poor, and you don't have many options. So what are some of the things that you might be able to do? And then Jason was going to address maybe some of the connectivity issues you may have had.
That would definitely be a concern of mine as well. We're right here in Indianapolis, and we worked with, it was Time Warner at the time, level 3 now. We didn't really have any bandwidth concerns. Actually, what we did was we started out with 100 meg pipe, and then as we initiated that replication, we could boost that up to 300, was kind of the dynamic capacity that we had access to. Very low latency. I mean, we really didn't have any bandwidth concerns other than our equipment on our side wasn't fast enough. We couldn't keep up with the IOPS of stuff we're trying to send across. But in an area, what would concern me less with that transition, because a slow provider is just going to take you longer to replicate. It took me 5 days, close to a week. It might take you 2 weeks. Just depends on how much data you have to move as well. What would concern me the most is your ongoing day-to-day operations. If in that building you don't have good internet access, then the experience that we have, which is the Bluelock environment, is incredibly faster than our local environment. A SQL server sitting on my LAN is slower than the SQL server sitting across the WAN link, and it's kind of difficult for that to sink in. But that might also be part of the nature of just how outdated our virtual infrastructure was and how badly we needed to upgrade it. I would be concerned more with the day-to-day operations than I would the initial replication.
Any other questions? Well, as Dan alluded to, please feel free to stop by. We do have a handout that more or less kind of summarizes Jason's journey. Jason will be sticking around for a little bit. Enjoy the day. Please visit the entire exhibit area, as we do appreciate you guys stopping by. Thank you very much.